Years after suicide bombers in London killed over 50 people, critics of the British government say national security policy has failed to make the country any safer, and that they have only succeeded in alienating the national Muslim population, and the risk of homegrown terrorism has not been reduced. RT's Laura Emmett reports.
The deadliest bombing in London since the Second World War. The suicide attacks of July the 7th, 2005 are burned into the memory of Londoners. And 5 years on, the threat of homegrown terrorism still looms large. According to some, UK national security policy isn't up to dealing with it. Dr. Azam Tamimi is a moderate Muslim scholar who believes the government's wasting valuable tools it has at its disposal for countering the threat.
In order to combat terrorism, you need to act on three things: policing, which they are already doing; secondly, community relations, and that is profoundly misread, misinformed and neglected, sometimes confused even; but more importantly, policy. Foreign policy is the cause of radicalization, and despite having proven wrong, the British government, which went to war in Iraq and earlier in Afghanistan, continues to be in Iraq and in Afghanistan.
Britain spends more than $200 million a year on preventing terrorism. Funding's given to local councils where 5% of the population is Muslim to spend on anti-radicalisation. A new report by the Centre for Social Cohesion shows that more than 2/3 of convicted Muslim terrorists in the UK come from here, and it says that money could be much better spent.
What our report shows is that as much as you can, there is an average individual that could potentially go on and commit Islamism-related offences. Our study found overwhelmingly that the people involved are young men, and in some of them have connections with British-based Islamist groups such as Al-Muhajirun, and I think the government needs to target its counter-extremism policy more acutely towards these sorts of communities rather than blanketly targeting Muslim communities across the country.
Instead, London's the scene of angry demonstrations like this one, and on rare occasions, terror attacks like the 4 coordinated bombs at rush hour 5 years ago. MP Jeremy Corbyn says the war in Afghanistan, together with the demonisation of the Muslim community as a whole, leads directly to terror acts.
We need to radically rethink our foreign policy and the way it's perceived around the world, because British politicians simply don't understand how disliked British foreign policy is over huge swathes of the Middle East. I think we're in danger of blaming young Muslims. They're excessively stopped by the police, excessively searched, usually suffer higher levels of unemployment than their peers, and are beginning to feel more and more isolated in society.
That isolation is unlikely to recede. A member of the new coalition government proposed a bill outlawing burqas at the beginning of this month, something that mirrors what's going on elsewhere in Europe.
This is King's Cross, and under the ground here is where many people were killed in the 7/7 bombings, 26 out of a total 56. Half a decade later, the threat from homegrown terrorism still hasn't been neutralised. British troops are still fighting an unpopular war in Afghanistan, and some experts argue that national security measures are alienating young Muslims, the very thing that led to this atrocity 5 years ago. Laura Emmett, RT, London.